She has been convicted of these crimes. She wasn't there for all of the verdicts to be read out. After the first two were read out, she decided she didn't want to be in court for the rest of the verdicts to come out. Pretty clear that if she'd been found guilty of those, that she was going to be found guilty of more. And now her team have said that she will not be appearing at the sentencing. And of course Dominic Raab has said about various other people, other killers, that this should not be a choice, that actually they should be compelled to sit in front of the people whose lives that she has so badly damaged, and to sit in front of the judge, to hear the judge's closing comments on her, and to suck it up, basically, to take it, because the families, in many cases, want to see justice being done. They want to see the face of the person who has done this to them and to their families receive the sentence. It is likely that the sentence she will receive will be a full life tariff. This is because that not just because of the numbers of children that she killed, but also because she was in a position of authority and trust when she carried this out. This full life tariff is reserved for very, very small percentage of cases because of human rights issues. That's why our life sentences are not life. And many people think they should be, but they're not. She will have no chance of parole, and that is it. That will be her gone. And she's one of only 3 women, I think, in history in this country that has received or may receive a full life tariff. We will have to wait until Monday for that sentencing to occur, but one thing we're fairly certain about is that she won't be in court. And joining me now is Andrew Taylor, who's a criminal defence barrister. Andrew, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
So that pretty much sums up, doesn't it, what we're looking at here with Nurse Letby. She is allowed, though, to decline to attend court for that sentencing, as all defendants are. Is this right, that she should be allowed to decline?
Well, first of all, of course, one cannot contemplate a more serious case than this, and my heart goes out to all the families and everyone affected by it. I can't contemplate a more serious case. And whatever happens on Monday, I think the trial judge, Mr. Justice Goss, will impose a full life term. I can't imagine any other sentence. Life sentences for murder are mandatory anyway, but the judge has a discretion to decide whether he needs to fix a fixed amount of time. Very rarely, as you say, full life terms are imposed. I think this is bound to be a full life term. Now, this is not new. We had earlier on this year the killer of 8-year-old, a young girl, 8-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was killed, of course, by Thomas Cashman. He refused to turn up. Also, Jordan McSweeney, he refused to turn up. And as a result of that, Dominic Raab, who was then the Justice Secretary, said, I will change the law. I will bring forward legislation to compel people to come to court. And that seems to have been a sentiment echoed by the Ministry of Justice very, very recently in the last few days. My own fear and my own concern is this, and I've had clients in my time, not as serious as the ones we've talked about, who have refused to leave their cell, they've refused to come to court, and sometimes when they even come to court, they refuse to come up the steps into the dock, and sometimes they've threatened to abuse the judge, they've threatened in one case to strip off naked. The courts are extremely solemn and serious places. And one of the things I think we need to reflect upon is this. Yes, we are told that Lucy Letby will not be there to hear her sentence on Monday. But for those who think, well, you can drag people kicking and screaming out of their cells into court, that's one thing, although, of course, it puts the prison officers, the police and the court staff at peril, because many of these people literally have nothing to lose. If they're convicted of another assault, another grievous bodily harm case, it matters not to them. They're in prison for life. That's the end of the story. They'll die in prison. And how would it improve the solemnity of the occasion? How would it improve the court's process? If, for example, Mr. Justice Goss was passing sentence, as he will on Monday, and we have somebody like Lucy Letby screaming at the families of victims, coming out with all sorts of expletives, that, I'm afraid, is a spectre that I would not want to witness, and I'm sure many aggrieved people would not want to witness.
But is it good enough, Andrew, for you know, it seems to me that we're almost rewarding bad behaviour and saying, oh, they might be naughty, so we can't bring them into court. It gives them the power, but that is placing the power. That is placing the power in their hands, right? They have full control over that situation, and I think that's what upsets us as members of the public, is to say, well, you should not have any control over what happens to you after what you did. Why are you controlling the narrative? Why are you controlling what's going to happen in court?
Well, one of the things, of course, that happens these days that didn't happen many years ago was that sometimes people are sentenced not in the courtroom itself, but via video link. And that was one of the options that the judge invited the defence team to consider. In other words, if Lucy Letby doesn't want to physically be brought to court, will she appear via video link? So you're in a room, as I'm speaking to you now, you and I are not in the same room, but we understand one another perfectly. One of the options was, well, she can be sentenced via the video link. That was declined. People like Lucy Letby, and I can't get my head around, I'm afraid, the motive, the rationale, any justification for what she did to these innocent, vulnerable babies. And she won't be rewarded for not turning up to court. I can well imagine people saying, well, she's still in charge. She's still deciding the agenda on Monday. But of course, she is going to be locked up for life. She will not come out of prison.
No. But does she not have to listen to victim impacts? The whole point of a victim impact statement, right, and these are usually read out during this time, is for her to hear them.
Impact statements, and I suspect on Monday there are going to be many, and there are going to be families. Of course, one family tragically lost 2 children. You know, as a father and as a parent, I can't even imagine what those people are still going through to this day, because it is absolutely devastating. Their lives will never be the same.
Never.
If I was in that predicament, and thank God I'm not, I would want to be there. I would want to address the judge myself as a victim.
No, I'd want to address her. That's the thing, is that she is denying, she's already denied these families so much. She has stolen, murdered their babies, and now they won't even be able to look her in the eye and say, this is what you did to me. It's not just for the judge, is it? The impact statement is so that she can feel something. I'd want her to know. I'd want to see her face while I was telling her what she did to my family.
Very much so. And of course, she turned up to her trial in part. She gave evidence in her own defence. Wasn't evidence that made any impression on the jury. We know that. But she turned up for some of the trial. There are many people today who don't even turn up for their trials. They are tried in their absence. Now, one of the things that I keep coming back to is this. If supposing the law was passed tonight and it said defendants can be dragged kicking and screaming into court and she can be brought into court on Monday, she could then, I'm not saying she would, but it's highly likely that people, because we're not dealing with normal people here. We're not dealing with rational people who think like your listeners and viewers, well, if it was me, I'd be petrified. I'd want to show due respect to the judge and everybody else there. These people are not like that. And many serious criminals are not like that. And they would come to court. And of course, you say, well, she's controlling the agenda. Yes, she is. If you force her to come to court, it might be her agenda to disrupt the proceedings completely.
Can't they put her in a glass box? I mean, in America, they have these sort of...
I mean, you know, we're not talking about Hannibal Lecter here. We're talking about, you know, the British system of justice. She is behind a glass screen. Courts these days have extremely secure docks. Not all that long ago, and I've been in a case where a person threw something at the judge from the dock. That can't happen anymore because, of course, now there are glass panels, and although they can see and hear what's going on, they can't either escape or throw things at the judge or even the barristers. So we do have glass in court, but of course, if we had a situation where the law is changed, first of all, we'd have to say to prison officers, right, you have to get her out of her cell, you have to transport her to court, you've got to get her out of the prison transport and take her into the court. We'd then have, no doubt, with some of them, all sorts of shenanigans. She might try to bite the prison officers, she might try to do all sorts of things. It would disrupt and delay the proceedings, and people perhaps who then turned up, and don't forget, people who turn up on days like this to hear the sentence are extremely, extremely anxious. This is the final episode in a devastating event. What if, for example, the judge was to say to them, well, we're not sentencing today because the defendant hasn't calmed down, we'll do it tomorrow, or we'll do it the following day. That would go on, and that would not do anything either to improve our system of justice, or perhaps to bring finality to the real victims in the case and their families. And so, although I agree with the sentiment of what's being said, the practicalities are very, very different.
Yeah, I fully accept what you're saying. It just is so galling that somebody who has done what she's done, and many others like her, are still in control, and they like that. They love that control, right? That's one of the reasons that they carry out what they do.
I think with some, and don't forget, we are talking here about a tiny, tiny minority of people. Majority of people turn up to court, they behave themselves, they listen, and they contribute to the proceedings. We're talking about a tiny, tiny minority. But that tiny minority sometimes take great pleasure in becoming centre stage. Yeah. And that's what they want. Yeah. They become centre stage for all the wrong reasons. And so it's a tragic, tragic case. But I don't think that any of the families involved in this, or the work colleagues and other people who must be beside themselves. Think of, for example, the doctors who were warning the hospital authority, this woman is a danger, and they were flatly ignored, and in some cases threatened themselves with disciplinary proceedings. There are many victims here. The biggest victims are the people dead and the people whose family around them don't carry on suffering. But don't forget, it goes beyond that. There are many, many other people, colleagues of Lucy Letby, who they themselves might have been under suspicion. This case.
Do you know, I really hate the fact, Andrew, that you're right. I mean, you've persuaded me on something that I was absolutely rigid on, and I'm not sure whether to thank you yet, but I know I will. I'll say thank you very much indeed for joining me this afternoon. Andrew Taylor there, criminal defence barrister. It's hard to argue with what Andrew's just said, isn't it?